Before we start, I need you to understand something. This is not a story about motorcycles. This is not a story about leather jackets and loud engines on a Sunday afternoon. This is a story about a man who made one mistake, one single, arrogant, boneheaded mistake, and set in motion something he was not ready for, not even close. He opened his mouth, he said 4 words, and by the next morning, 60 women on motorcycles were lined up outside his door. Engines running, eyes locked forward, not saying a word. Just waiting, just there. If you've ever underestimated someone and lived to regret it, you already know how this story ends, but you don't know how it got there. So stay with me, because every single detail matters. There's a stretch of road in central Texas just south of Waco on Highway 6, where the land flattens out so completely that you can see a storm coming from 40 miles away. The sky turns that specific shade of bruised green. And if you know anything about riding, you pull over. You respect it. You don't fight it. Dora Reyes knew that road like she knew the back of her own hand. She had ridden it in July heat that melted the asphalt, in January cold that cracked her knuckles through her gloves, and in that flat, impossible darkness of 3 a.m., when the only thing between you and the void is your headlight and your nerve. She had been riding since she was 19 years old. Her first bike was a beat-up '94 Sportster that her uncle left her when he passed, the only thing he owned that was worth anything, and even then it barely ran. She fixed it herself, learned everything from YouTube videos, grease-stained manuals, and the kind of trial and error that leaves scars, real ones. By the time she was 26, she had ridden from Brownsville to Amarillo without stopping except for gas and black coffee. By 32, she had logged over 120,000 miles on 3 different bikes, crossed 18 states, and become someone that riders across the Southwest knew by name, by reputation, by the sound of her engine coming down the road. She wasn't loud about it. That was the thing people always got wrong about Dora. They expected someone who filled every room, who talked over people, who wore her authority like a neon sign. But that wasn't her. Her authority was quiet, the kind that doesn't need to announce itself because everyone in the room already feels it. She had co-founded Iron Magnolia Stories 15 years earlier with her best friend, Carmen Vega, in a rented garage off South Congress Avenue in Austin. 2 women, 2 bikes, 1 shared dream. Build something real. Build something that lasts. And they did. Slowly, stubbornly, mile by mile, they built a club that stood for something. No drama, no ego, no nonsense. You ride hard, you look out for your sisters. You never leave anyone on the side of the road. That was the code. Simple as that. Over the years, chapters formed in San Antonio, El Paso, Albuquerque, Phoenix, and Tucson. Women from all walks of life. Teachers, nurses, mechanics, lawyers, veterans, all of them connected by the road and by the values Dora had spent her life building. By the time this story happens, Iron Magnolia had 60 active members in Texas alone. 60 women, every one of them ready. His name was Randy Briggs. And to understand what he did, you need to understand who Randy was, because he didn't come out of nowhere. He was the kind of person that every riding community has at least one of. The guy who shows up loud, talks about his bike constantly, quotes patch regulations like he wrote them himself, and has a deep, unshakable belief that the road belongs to him more than it belongs to anyone else. Randy rode a 2019 Road Glide Custom. He kept it spotless. Chrome everything, custom paint job, the whole deal. It looked great. He talked about it like it was a religious experience. But the people who had ridden with him for years knew something that newcomers had to learn the hard way. Randy was all show. His bike was perfect and his riding was cautious, and his ego was enormous, and none of those 3 things matched. He was a senior member of the Lone Star Iron Brotherhood, a men's club out of Killeen, Texas, that had been around since the late 90s. Good guys mostly. A few bad apples like everywhere. Randy was somewhere in between. Not violent, not criminal, just deeply, consistently, exhaustingly full of himself. Every year there was a charity run organized by a coalition of clubs across Central Texas. A 200-mile loop from Killeen down through Lampasas, through Llano and Fredericksburg in the Texas Hill Country, and back up through Johnson City and Georgetown, before finishing in Round Rock. The route was famous. The Hill Country stretch was one of the most beautiful rides in all of Texas. FM 1323, Ranch Road 965. Those winding roads through Cedar and Live Oak where the deer cross at dawn and the sky is so clear it makes you feel religious. Every club in the coalition pitched in. Every club got a say. It had always been that way. Until Randy decided it shouldn't be. The meeting was held at Rusty's Grill in Killeen, a BBQ joint that doubled as neutral ground for club business. 8 clubs represented, about 40 people in the room. Dora was there for Iron Magnolia, along with her road captain, a woman named Lisa Morrow, who had been riding for 23 years and had the patience of someone who had learned the hard way that some battles are worth waiting for. The meeting was going fine. Routes were discussed, fundraising logistics, t-shirt designs, the usual. And then Randy Briggs cleared his throat, leaned back in his chair, and said it. He said, "No offense, but I think the route decisions should be made by the clubs that have been doing this the longest. The real clubs." He paused, looked around the table, then let his eyes land on Dora. Women's clubs are great for participation, but leadership on something like this? That's a different thing. The room went quiet. Not the uncomfortable kind of quiet where everyone looks at the floor. The still kind of quiet. The kind that means something is shifting. Dora didn't react immediately. She picked up her coffee cup. She took a slow sip. She set it back down and she looked at Randy with an expression that people in that room would describe differently for years afterward. Some said she looked calm. Some said she looked like a woman who had been waiting for exactly this moment. Some said she looked like the storm on Highway 6. Already here, already decided, just letting you know it was coming. She said, "Noted." And nothing else. Randy mistook her silence for acceptance. He kept talking. He said something about no hard feelings, and just being practical, and everyone has a role. He was still talking when Dora stood up, picked up her jacket from the back of her chair, and walked out. Lisa followed. So did the other 2 Iron Magnolia members in the room. Randy watched them go. He shrugged. He thought it was settled. He had no idea what he had just started. It was 9:47 p.m. when Dora sent the message. Not an angry message, not a dramatic message, just 3 lines. He said women don't belong in leadership. Said it in front of everyone. We ride tomorrow, 6 a.m. Gear up. That was it. No explanation needed. No rallying speech. No fire and brimstone language about respect and dignity and the history of women in the riding community. Just 3 lines at a time. Within 4 minutes, the responses were coming in, one after another, in that rapid-fire rhythm of a group chat that has been activated. Not just from Austin, from San Antonio, from El Paso, from Lubbock. Women who had already gone to bed were setting their alarms. Women who were still up were pulling out their gear. A nurse named Tamara, who had a double shift the next day, called in and switched with a coworker. A retired Army sergeant named Brenda, who lived 60 miles away in Bastrop, started checking road conditions at 10 p.m. Carmen, who had co-founded the club with Dora and now lived in San Marcos, called instead of texting. "How many?" she asked. "However many show up," Dora said. "I'll be there at 5:30. I know. By midnight, 43 women had confirmed. By 4 a.m., that number was 61. They came from Austin and Round Rock and Cedar Park, from New Braunfels and Kyle and Buda, from Lockhart, which is 45 minutes out, and from Georgetown, which is even further. One woman, a postal worker named Angela, drove her truck from Waco with her bike in the bed because her back tire had a slow leak she hadn't fixed yet. And she wasn't about to let a slow leak be the reason she missed this. She changed the tire in Dora's driveway at 5 a.m. by flashlight. That's the thing about this community. That's the thing that people who have never been part of something like this don't understand. It is not just riding. It is not just motorcycles and highways and wind in your face. It is the kind of loyalty that gets built over years of showing up, over thousands of miles ridden together, over breakdowns and detours and moments where someone needed help and help arrived. Randy Briggs had spent years in a motorcycle club and still didn't understand this. He thought a club was a hierarchy. He thought it was about who had been around the longest and whose voice was the loudest. He had never understood that the strongest clubs are not built on rank. They are built on trust. Randy Briggs lived in a single-story house on the outskirts of Killeen, on a quiet, dead-end road just off Clear Creek Road. Nice neighborhood, well-kept yard. 2 cars in the driveway, one of them belonging to his adult son who was visiting for the week. He woke up at 6:47 a.m. to the sound of something he could not immediately identify. It wasn't loud exactly. It was more like a presence, a low, sustained vibration that he felt before he heard it. The way you feel bass through a wall before you register it as sound. He lay in bed for a moment, trying to place it. Then he got up, walked to the front window and looked out. He stood there for a long time without moving. The road in front of his house, the quiet dead-end road where nothing ever happened, was completely lined with motorcycles. They were parked in a perfect 2x2 formation starting at his driveway and extending back as far as he could see from his window. Every bike had a rider. Every rider was in Iron Magnolia colors. Not one of them was moving. Not one of them was talking. They were just there. Engines idling, eyes forward. 60 women. His son came out of the guest room behind him. "Dad, what's going on?" Randy didn't answer right away. He was still processing. His phone buzzed. He looked down at it. One message from a number he recognized, Dora Reyes. It said, "We ride every road you ride. We lead every room you think you own. This is what women's leadership looks like. Have a good morning." He read it twice. Outside, not one engine revved. Not one horn honked. No one made a move toward his door. They didn't need to. They were already making the point. His son was at the window now. "Those are a lot of bikes," he said quietly. "Yeah," Randy said. His voice came out smaller than he expected. After 12 minutes, not because it was a planned duration, just because that was how long it took for Dora to feel that the message had landed, she raised her left hand. The signal passed back through the line like a current. One by one, then together, 60 engines revved once, clean and synchronized, the sound rising and then settling back into idle. Then Dora pulled out. The formation followed. 2x2, disciplined and unhurried. They rolled down the road, turned onto Clear Creek, and were gone. The whole thing lasted less than 15 minutes. Randy stood at his window for another 5 minutes after the sound had faded. His son stood beside him. Neither of them said anything for a while. Finally, his son asked, "What did you do?" Randy didn't answer. But the look on his face was its own answer. Word traveled fast. In the riding community, it always does. By noon that same day, people were talking about it at rally stops from Sturgis, South Dakota, all the way down to Daytona Beach. Someone had taken a photo from the end of the street. You couldn't make out faces, just the long line of bikes and riders in the early morning light. And it was circulating through every motorcycle group and forum and chat thread in the Southwest. The reactions were what you'd expect. Some people were amazed. Some were inspired. Some old-school riders grumbled about politics and drama, which is what some people say when they mean they're uncomfortable with accountability. And some people, a lot of people, just looked at that photo and felt something they couldn't quite name. Pride, maybe, or recognition. The feeling of seeing something done right. At the charity run meeting 3 days later, Randy Briggs showed up. He sat down. He didn't say much. When the topic of route leadership came up, he looked at the table and said, "I think all the clubs should have equal input. That's how it should work." Nobody commented on the change. They just moved forward. That's how Dora had wanted it. Not a public humiliation. Not a drawn-out confrontation. Just a correction, clear and undeniable, delivered in a language that everyone in that room, in every room, could understand. She had ridden the road long enough to know that you don't win by being louder. You win by showing up, by being consistent. By building something so solid that when someone tries to dismiss it, all you have to do is let it speak for itself. 60 bikes on a quiet road at 7 a.m. Engines idling, nobody raising their voice. That spoke for itself. A lot of people, after hearing this story for the first time, want to make it about a fight. They want to frame it as a war between men and women in the motorcycle world. They want it to be angrier than it was, louder than it was, more dramatic than it was. But that's not what this is. This is about a community, a real one. The kind that gets built slowly across years, on back roads and long highways, and the kind of silences you only experience when you're riding at night and the world shrinks down to the cone of your headlight and the road ahead. Iron Magnolia Stories was never about proving something to someone else. It was about building something for themselves. For the woman who gets on her bike at 5 a.m. because the road before sunrise is the only quiet she gets all day. For the veteran who found that riding was the only thing that turned the volume down in her head after she came home. For the teenager watching her aunt pull up on a Harley and thinking, for the first time, that maybe she's allowed to take up space. Every club has a culture. And culture is just the sum of every decision you make, day after day, about what matters and what doesn't. Iron Magnolia decided a long time ago that it matters who speaks up, that it matters who shows up, that it matters that nobody gets left behind, not on the road, not in a meeting, not when someone looks them in the eye and says, "You don't belong here." Because the road doesn't care who you are. The road just asks whether you can ride it. And Dora Reyes has been answering that question since she was 19 years old, on a beat-up Sportster that barely ran, on a stretch of highway in Texas, where you can see the storm coming from 40 miles away. She saw this one coming too. She was ready. 3 weeks after the morning on Clear Creek Road, the charity run happened. The route went through Lampasas and Llano and Fredericksburg, down FM 1323 where the cedar gets thick and the air smells like something ancient and alive, through Willow City and Johnson City and back up through Round Rock. Iron Magnolia rode in the lead position, not because anyone gave it to them, because they had earned it mile by mile, year by year, and nobody in that coalition argued otherwise. The run raised $47,000 for a veterans housing program in Central Texas. 23 clubs participated. It was the biggest turnout in the history of the event. At the finish line in Round Rock, Dora stood next to her bike and talked to riders she hadn't seen in years, and riders she was meeting for the first time. She drank black coffee out of a paper cup and watched the last bikes roll in with that particular satisfaction of someone who has done the thing they came to do. Carmen found her at some point in the late afternoon, leaned against the same bike and said, "You know he's going to tell this story differently someday." Dora smiled. "Let him," she said. The road remembers what actually happened. A woman nearby, someone who had ridden up from San Antonio and was hearing this exchange for the first time, laughed out loud. And then she pulled out her phone and wrote it down. Because some things deserve to be remembered exactly as they happened. The road remembers. So do we.